Sarah Martinez walked through the university gates wearing her father's old military camouflage jacket, the fabric worn soft from years of washing. The October morning was crisp, and she pulled the oversized jacket tighter around her small frame. She had chosen this outfit carefully, knowing today would be different from all the others. At 19, Sarah looked nothing like the typical college freshman. While her classmates wore designer clothes and carried expensive bags, she walked with purpose in combat boots that had seen real combat. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held a seriousness that seemed out of place among the carefree students around her. The whispers started as soon as she entered the main building. Students pointed and giggled, some taking photos with their phones. "Look at the wannabe soldier girl," someone muttered loud enough for her to hear. Another student made a comment about Halloween being weeks away. Sarah kept her head high and continued walking, but each comment felt like a small stab to her heart. In her morning psychology class, the professor was discussing trauma and its effects on families. Sarah sat in the back row, as always, listening intently while her classmates seemed more interested in their phones than the lecture. When the professor asked for examples of how families cope with stress, the room fell silent. Sarah raised her hand slowly. "My family deals with it by staying strong for each other," she said simply. "When someone you love is serving overseas, you learn that every day is precious." The room remained quiet, but not the respectful kind of quiet. It was the uncomfortable silence of people who didn't understand. After class, Sarah overheard two girls talking near the water fountain. "She's so dramatic," one said, "wearing that army costume like she's some kind of hero. I bet she bought it at a thrift store." The other girl laughed. "Probably thinks it makes her look tough or something." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. These students had no idea what her family had been through. They didn't know about the sleepless nights waiting for phone calls, the constant worry, or the empty chair at the dinner table. They saw her camouflage jacket as a costume, but for Sarah, it was a connection to someone very important. During lunch, she sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at her sandwich while groups of students laughed and chatted around her. She pulled out her phone and looked at a photo from 6 months ago. In the picture, a tall man in military uniform stood next to her at her high school graduation, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling broadly. Sarah had been accepted to this prestigious university on a full scholarship. Her grades were excellent and she had worked hard to get here. But fitting in seemed impossible. Her classmates talked about spring break trips to Europe and expensive cars, while Sarah worked part-time at a local diner to help pay for textbooks and basic expenses. The afternoon brought more of the same. In her literature class, when they discussed stories about war and conflict, Sarah offered insights that came from real experience. But instead of being taken seriously, she noticed eye rolls and smirks from her classmates. One student even whispered to another, "She acts like she knows everything about the military." As the day wore on, Sarah began to question whether she belonged here at all. Maybe she should have chosen a different school, one where she wouldn't stand out so much. Maybe she should have left the camouflage jacket at home and tried harder to blend in with the other students. But every time she felt like giving up, she remembered why she was here. Education had always been important in her family. Her parents had worked multiple jobs to support her dreams, and she wasn't about to let their sacrifices go to waste. She was here to learn, to grow, and to make something of herself. Walking across campus after her last class of the day, Sarah noticed a group of students gathered around someone with a guitar. They were singing popular songs and laughing, looking like they belonged in a movie about college life. For a moment, she wished she could be that carefree, that she could forget about the weight she carried and just be a normal teenager. The sun was setting as Sarah made her way to the library to study. She had always been a good student, but college was more challenging than high school. She needed to stay focused on her goals, even when everything else seemed to be working against her. Tomorrow would bring another day of whispers and stares, but she would face it with the same strength her family had taught her. As she opened her textbook, Sarah touched the military patch on her jacket sleeve. It was a small gesture that gave her comfort and reminded her that she was not alone. Somewhere, someone was thinking of her too, and that knowledge gave her the courage to keep going, no matter what her classmates thought about her choice of clothing. The next morning brought a new level of humiliation for Sarah. Someone had taken a photo of her from the day before and posted it on the university's social media page with the caption, "When you order your military uniform from wish.com." The post had dozens of likes and comments, most of them mocking her appearance and making jokes about her playing soldier. Sarah stared at her phone screen in the bathroom mirror, reading comment after comment. "Attention seeker," wrote one student. "Stolen valor much?" posted another. The worst part was that some of the comments came from people in her own classes, students she had to face every day. Her roommate Jessica walked in just as Sarah was wiping tears from her eyes. Jessica was everything Sarah wasn't: wealthy, popular, and seemingly without a care in the world. Her side of the room was decorated with photos from expensive vacations and designer items that cost more than Sarah's monthly food budget. "Oh my God, you're not crying over that stupid post, are you?" Jessica said, applying lipstick in the mirror. "I mean, you had to know people would react to you wearing that weird jacket everywhere. Why don't you just dress normal like everyone else?" Sarah wanted to explain, but Jessica had already grabbed her designer bag and left for class. The room felt even lonelier than usual. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror, wondering if she should change clothes. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was just drawing unnecessary attention to herself. In her morning economics class, the professor was discussing the cost of military operations. Sarah found herself automatically calculating figures and thinking about resource allocation in ways that surprised even her. When the professor asked a complex question about military spending, Sarah's hand shot up without thinking. "The hidden costs aren't just in equipment and salaries," she said, standing up to address the class. "There are family support systems, medical care that lasts for decades, education benefits, and psychological services. When you calculate the true cost of military operations, you have to factor in the human element that continues long after the mission ends." The classroom fell silent. Even the professor looked surprised by the depth of her answer. Several students turned to stare at her, but this time their expressions were different. Instead of mockery, she saw curiosity and perhaps a hint of respect. After class, a tall boy named Marcus approached her. "Hey, that was really smart what you said in there. Are you studying military economics or something?" Sarah shook her head, unsure how to explain her knowledge without revealing too much about her personal situation. "I just read a lot," she said simply. Marcus nodded, seeming to accept her answer. "Well, if you ever want to study together, I'm usually in the library after 6. That economics stuff is brutal." It was the first friendly conversation Sarah had with a classmate since arriving at the university. During lunch, Sarah sat in her usual spot, but this time she wasn't entirely alone. Marcus had invited her to sit with his study group, but she had declined, not ready to trust that the invitation was genuine. She watched from across the cafeteria as he told his friends about her insightful comment in class. The afternoon brought a new challenge. In her political science class, they were discussing current military conflicts around the world. Sarah listened as her classmates offered opinions based on news articles and social media posts, their understanding surface level at best. When one student made a particularly ignorant comment about military families, Sarah felt her patience snap. "That's not how it works," she said, her voice louder than she intended. The class turned to look at her. "Military families don't just get over it when someone comes home. There's adjustment, there's trauma, there's months of rebuilding relationships, and that's if they come home at all." The student who had made the original comment rolled his eyes. "Oh great, here comes our resident military expert again. Let me guess, you watched a documentary about it?" The comment sparked laughter from several classmates, but Sarah noticed that not everyone was laughing. Some students looked genuinely interested in what she had to say. Professor Williams, an older man with gray hair, raised his hand for silence. "Actually, Sarah raises an important point that we should explore further. The psychological and social impacts of military service extend far beyond the individual soldier. Sarah, would you be willing to share more about your perspective?" For a moment, Sarah considered declining. She could make up an excuse, say she had read about it somewhere, and avoid revealing the truth about her background. But looking around the classroom, she realized that some of her classmates genuinely wanted to learn. Maybe her experiences could help them understand something important. "Military service affects entire families," she began, her voice growing stronger. "When someone you love is deployed, you live with constant uncertainty. Every phone call could bring good news or devastating news. You learn to be strong even when you're falling apart inside because someone else is depending on you to hold things together. The classroom remained quiet as she spoke. Even the student who had mocked her earlier seemed to be paying attention. Sarah felt a strange mix of vulnerability and empowerment as she shared this piece of her life with people who had judged her so harshly. After class, Professor Williams asked her to stay behind. "Sarah, I've been teaching this course for 15 years, and I've rarely heard such authentic insight from a student. Have you considered specializing in military psychology or social work? Your perspective would be valuable in those fields." Walking across campus that evening, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving at the university: hope. Maybe she didn't have to choose between being true to herself and fitting in. Maybe there was a place for someone like her in this academic world after all. But as she passed a group of students who immediately started whispering and pointing at her jacket, Sarah realized that changing their minds would take more than one good answer in class. The real challenge was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's viral photo, and the mockery showed no signs of stopping. If anything, it had gotten worse. Students would salute her mockingly in the hallways, make explosion sounds when she walked by, and someone had even left a toy soldier on her desk in chemistry class. Sarah sat in the campus counseling center, something she had never imagined herself doing. The counselor, Dr. Patricia Chen, was a kind woman in her 40s who specialized in helping students adjust to college life. Sarah had finally reached her breaking point the night before, when she found her roommate and friends making fun of her military jacket while recording videos for social media. "I just don't understand why it bothers them so much," Sarah said, clutching a tissue. "It's just a jacket. I'm not hurting anyone or causing problems in class. My grades are good, I follow all the rules, but they act like I'm some kind of freak." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, can you tell me why that particular jacket is important to you? I sense there's more to this story than just a fashion choice." Sarah hesitated. She had kept her family situation private for so long that sharing it felt almost impossible. But sitting in this small, comfortable office, she finally felt safe enough to tell someone the truth. "It's my brother's jacket," she whispered. "Captain Miguel Martinez, United States Army. He's been deployed in Afghanistan for 8 months now." Her voice broke slightly. "He gave it to me before he left and told me to wear it whenever I needed to feel brave." Dr. Chen nodded, understanding. "And you've needed to feel brave quite a lot lately, haven't you?" The floodgates opened. Sarah told Dr. Chen everything, about the sleepless nights waiting for Miguel's calls, about her parents working extra shifts to pay for his wife and baby's expenses while he was gone, about the constant fear that a uniformed officer might appear at their door with terrible news. She explained how the jacket made her feel connected to her brother, how it reminded her that she came from a family of strong people who didn't give up when things got difficult. "These students have no idea what real problems look like," Sarah said, anger creeping into her voice. "They complain about their meal plans and their internet speed while my family counts down days until Miguel comes home safely. They think I'm playing dress-up, but I'm just trying to honor someone who's risking his life for their freedom to mock me." Dr. Chen listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions that helped Sarah process her emotions. By the end of the session, Sarah felt both exhausted and relieved. It was the first time she had spoken openly about her fears and frustrations with someone who truly understood. Meanwhile, the situation on campus was escalating in ways Sarah didn't yet realize. Marcus, the boy from her economics class, had been watching the ongoing harassment with growing concern. He had tried to defend Sarah when he heard other students making cruel comments, but his efforts only seemed to make things worse for her. That afternoon, a group of fraternity brothers decided to take their harassment to the next level. They had been drinking during lunch and thought it would be hilarious to stage a mock military ceremony in the quad when Sarah walked by. They gathered around with makeshift uniforms made from bed sheets and cardboard medals, planning to salute her and shout military commands as she passed. Sarah was walking back from the library when she saw the crowd gathered ahead. At first, she thought it might be a legitimate military event. The university occasionally hosted ROTC ceremonies. But as she got closer, she realized what was really happening. The fake uniforms, the exaggerated salutes, the barely contained laughter. It was all aimed at her. She stopped walking, unsure whether to turn around and take a longer route to her dorm or push through the crowd and endure whatever they had planned. The decision was made for her when someone spotted her and shouted, "Look, it's our fearless leader!" The group erupted in fake military commands and ridiculous salutes. "Attention! General Camo is here!" someone yelled. "Should we ask her about her tour of duty at the mall?" another added, causing widespread laughter. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with humiliation, but she forced herself to keep walking. As she passed through the group, trying to maintain her dignity, one of the fraternity brothers stepped directly in front of her. "Hey, soldier girl, why don't you show us some of those combat moves you learned in fashion boot camp?" He was clearly intoxicated and seemed to think he was being incredibly funny. "Please move," Sarah said quietly, trying to step around him, but he moved with her, blocking her path while his friends cheered him on. "Come on, don't be shy. Give us a demonstration of your military training." The crowd was growing larger as other students stopped to watch the spectacle. Sarah felt trapped and humiliated, but she also felt something else rising within her. A fierce anger that reminded her exactly whose jacket she was wearing. Miguel had taught her never to back down from bullies, whether they wore enemy uniforms or fraternity letters. "You want to see military training?" Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the quad. The crowd quieted, sensing that something had shifted. Military training teaches you discipline, respect, sacrifice, and honor. It teaches you to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves and to put service before self. She looked directly at the boy blocking her path. It also teaches you that real strength doesn't come from picking on people who are different from you. Real strength comes from protecting others, even when it's difficult or unpopular. The quad had gone completely silent. Even the fraternity brother seemed unsure how to respond to her serious tone. Sarah took advantage of his hesitation to step around him and continue walking, her head held high and her brother's jacket worn with pride. As she walked away, she heard scattered applause from somewhere in the crowd. It wasn't much, but it was something. For the first time since arriving at the university, Sarah felt like she had truly stood up for herself and for what she believed in. But she also knew that this confrontation would have consequences. Word would spread quickly across campus, and she had no idea whether those consequences would be positive or negative. All she knew was that she had reached her limit, and she wasn't going to hide anymore. The video of Sarah's confrontation in the quad spread across social media faster than she could have imagined. By evening, it had been shared hundreds of times with mixed reactions. Some students praised her for standing up to the bullies, while others criticized her for being dramatic and taking herself too seriously. Sarah tried to avoid looking at the comments, but it was impossible to escape the constant buzz of notifications on her phone. Her roommate Jessica came back to their dorm room that night with news that made Sarah's stomach drop. "So apparently the dean's office wants to see you tomorrow morning," she said, not looking up from her own phone. "Someone complained that your little speech was disruptive to campus activities." Sarah felt her world spinning. She had worked so hard to get into this university, and now she might be in serious trouble for simply defending herself. She called her parents that night, but couldn't bring herself to tell them what was happening. They had enough to worry about with Miguel overseas, and she didn't want to add to their stress. Sleep was impossible. Sarah lay awake replaying the day's events, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe she should have just kept her mouth shut and endured the harassment quietly. Maybe fighting back had only made things worse for herself and her family. The next morning, Sarah walked to the dean's office wearing Miguel's jacket with more determination than ever. If they were going to punish her for standing up for military families, then she would face that punishment with the same courage her brother showed every day in Afghanistan. Dean Morrison was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had been at the university for over 20 years. Sarah sat across from her desk, trying to read her expression and failing completely. The dean had a folder in front of her that Sarah assumed contained reports about yesterday's incident. "Miss Martinez," Dean Morrison began, "I understand there was some kind of altercation in the quad yesterday, involving you and several other students." Sarah nodded, unsure whether she should apologize or defend her actions. "Yes, ma'am. But I didn't start anything. I was just trying to walk to my dorm." Dean Morrison opened the folder and pulled out several printed screenshots from social media. "I've seen the video of your response to the harassment you've been experiencing. I've also received multiple reports from faculty members about ongoing issues related to your distinctive choice of clothing." Sarah's heart sank. This was it. She was going to be expelled for wearing her brother's jacket and refusing to be bullied quietly. She thought about Miguel and how disappointed he would be if his sister got kicked out of college because of something he had given her. However, Dean Morrison continued, and Sarah looked up in surprise. I've also received reports from several professors praising your academic performance and the unique perspective you bring to class discussions. Professor Williams in particular spoke very highly of your insights into military and political issues. The dean leaned back in her chair. Miss Martinez, I've been in higher education for most of my career, and I've seen many students struggle to find their place in our community. What I saw in that video yesterday wasn't a disruptive student causing problems. It was a young woman who had been pushed to her limit by systematic harassment. Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but it wasn't going in the direction she had expected. Can you tell me about that jacket? Dean Morrison asked gently. I sense it has special significance for you. For the second time in 2 days, Sarah found herself opening up to someone in authority about her family situation. She told Dean Morrison about Miguel, about the deployment, about the constant worry, and the way the jacket made her feel connected to her brother's strength and courage. Dean Morrison listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed she genuinely understood the challenges military families faced. When Sarah finished her story, the dean was quiet for a long moment. Miss Martinez, I owe you an apology. This institution has failed to protect you from harassment, and that's unacceptable. No student should have to endure what you've experienced simply for honoring a family member's service to our country. Sarah was stunned. She had come prepared for punishment, but instead she was receiving support and understanding from the highest levels of university administration. What happens now? Sarah asked quietly. Dean Morrison closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. Now we make some changes. The students involved in yesterday's harassment will face disciplinary action. We're also going to implement some educational programs about military families and the sacrifices they make, and I want to personally invite you to speak at our Veterans Day ceremony next month. The idea of speaking in front of the entire university terrified Sarah, but it also excited her. Maybe she could help other students understand what military families went through. Maybe her experience could prevent other military children from facing the same harassment she had endured. There's something else, Dean Morrison said, reaching into her desk drawer. I received a call this morning that I think you should know about. It seems your video caught the attention of someone at the local Army base. Colonel Jennifer Hayes wants to meet with you. Sarah's eyes widened. She had never met a real colonel before, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. What does she want to meet about? I think that's something you'll need to ask her directly. But I have a feeling this conversation might change your perspective on a few things. Walking back across campus that afternoon, Sarah felt different than she had in weeks. Students still stared at her jacket, but now she also noticed some who nodded respectfully or gave her encouraging smiles. Word was spreading about her meeting with the dean and the upcoming disciplinary actions against her harassers. Marcus caught up with her outside the library. Hey, I heard about what happened yesterday and this morning. I just wanted you to know that a lot of us think what you did was really brave. Those guys had it coming. Sarah smiled, her first genuine smile since arriving at the university. Thanks, Marcus. That means a lot. So I heard you might be speaking at the Veterans Day ceremony? He asked. Sarah nodded, still not quite believing it herself. That's amazing. If you want help preparing or need someone to practice with, let me know. I think you have important things to say. For the first time since putting on Miguel's jacket that first day of school, Sarah felt like she might actually belong at this university. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer walking it alone. Colonel Jennifer Hayes was not what Sarah had expected. The woman who greeted her at the military base was younger than Sarah's mother, with kind eyes and a firm handshake that spoke of confidence earned through experience. She wore her uniform with the same pride Sarah wore her brother's jacket, and Sarah immediately felt a connection to her. Miss Martinez. Thank you for coming, Colonel Hayes said, leading Sarah to a small conference room. I have to tell you, your video has been making rounds on military social media. You've got quite a few people talking. Sarah wasn't sure if that was good or bad news. I hope I didn't say anything wrong, ma'am. I was just trying to defend my family. Colonel Hayes smiled. You said everything right. In fact, you articulated something that many military families struggle to express: the ripple effective service on everyone who loves a soldier. The colonel opened a laptop and showed Sarah dozens of comments and messages from military families around the world. Parents, siblings, spouses, and children had all shared their own stories of harassment, misunderstanding, and the challenges of supporting someone in uniform. "Your brother Miguel isn't just proud of you, he's impressed," Colonel Hayes said, and Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "I spoke with his commanding officer this morning. Apparently the video made it all the way to his base in Afghanistan." Sarah felt her heart racing. "You talked to someone who knows Miguel?" "Not just someone who knows him, someone who speaks very highly of him. Captain Martinez has been recommended for a commendation for his work with local communities over there. His commanding officer says he shows the same courage and integrity his sister demonstrated in that campus quad." Tears were flowing freely down Sarah's cheeks now, and she didn't try to stop them. For months she had felt disconnected from Miguel, wondering if he would be proud of how she was handling college life. Now she knew that not only was he proud, but his fellow soldiers were hearing about her courage too. "There's more," Colonel Hayes continued. "Several universities around the country have reached out after seeing your story. They want to start support groups for military families on their campuses. Your voice has started something much bigger than one confrontation at one school." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her worst day had somehow turned into something that might help other people going through similar struggles. "I have a proposition for you," Colonel Hayes said. "We have a program that connects military families with college campuses to help educate students about the realities of military life. Would you be interested in becoming our first student ambassador?" The opportunity was beyond anything Sarah had dreamed of. She would be able to travel to other universities, share her story, and help create understanding between civilian students and military families. It would also look impressive on her resume and might help her get into graduate school later. "What would I have to do?" Sarah asked. "Exactly what you did in that quad. Tell the truth about what it's like to love someone in uniform. Help people understand that military families are real people with real struggles, not just symbols or statistics." Sarah accepted immediately. As she drove back to campus, her phone was buzzing with messages from her parents. Miguel had managed to call home and tell them about the video and the conversation with his commanding officer. Her mother was crying with pride, and her father said he had never been more impressed with his daughter's strength. Back at the university, word of Sarah's meeting with Colonel Hayes had spread quickly. When she walked into her evening psychology class, Professor Martinez, no relation, despite the shared surname, asked her to stay after class. "Sarah, I've been following your situation and I wanted to discuss something with you. I'm conducting research on the psychological impacts of deployment on military families. Would you be interested in participating as a research assistant? Your insights could contribute to better support programs for families like yours." Sarah's academic life was suddenly full of opportunities she had never imagined. Professors who had barely noticed her before were now recognizing her unique perspective and expertise. She was being invited to guest lecture in political science classes and contribute to research projects. The social dynamics on campus were changing too. The fraternity brothers who had harassed her were facing serious disciplinary action, including suspension from the university. Several had been required to perform community service at local veterans organizations, and a few had even reached out to apologize directly to Sarah. More importantly, other students were beginning to approach her with their own stories. Sarah discovered that she wasn't the only one on campus with military connections. There was Emma, whose father was a Navy pilot, David, whose sister was a Marine, and Jennifer, whose boyfriend was deployed with the Air Force. They had all been hiding their military connections, afraid of being judged or misunderstood. "I stopped wearing my dad's Navy pin because people kept asking stupid questions," Emma told Sarah over coffee. "But seeing you stand up for your brother made me realize I was hiding something I should be proud of." Sarah and these students decided to start an informal support group that met weekly in the student center. They called it Military Connected, and it quickly grew from 4 students to over 20. They shared stories, supported each other through deployments and homecomings, and worked together to educate other students about military life. The group's first major project was creating an information booth for the upcoming Veterans Day ceremony. They planned to display photos and stories from military families, provide resources for students with military connections, and help other students understand how to support their military-connected classmates. Sarah's roommate, Jessica, had even begun to change her attitude. After learning about Miguel's deployment and the stress Sarah's family was under, Jessica started asking genuine questions about military life instead of making dismissive comments about Sarah's clothing choices. "I had no idea what your family was going through," Jessica admitted one evening. "I thought you were just trying to be different or get attention. I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive." The apology meant more to Sarah than Jessica probably realized. Having support in her own living space made everything else feel more manageable. As Veterans Day approached, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about her upcoming speech. She had been working with Colonel Hayes and Dean Morrison to craft a message that would honor all military families while helping students understand the reality behind the uniform. But the most important part of her preparation was yet to come. Miguel was scheduled to call home the night before the ceremony, and Sarah would finally get to tell her brother directly how much his jacket had meant to her, and how wearing it had changed not just her life, but the lives of military families across the country. Veterans Day morning arrived crisp and clear, with hundreds of students, faculty, and community members gathering in the university's main quad for the ceremony. Sarah stood backstage in the same camouflage jacket that had caused so much controversy just weeks before. But now it felt different. Instead of armor protecting her from judgment, it felt like a bridge connecting her to everyone who had served and sacrificed. Her parents had driven up from home to attend the ceremony, bringing Miguel's wife Elena and their baby daughter Sophia. Sarah's mother couldn't stop crying with pride, and her father kept adjusting his tie nervously. He had never attended a university function before, but he wouldn't miss his daughter's moment for anything. "You ready for this, mija?" her father asked, using the Spanish nickname that always made her feel loved and supported. Sarah nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly as she reviewed her speech notes one final time. Dean Morrison introduced Sarah to thunderous applause, much of it coming from her military-connected support group, who had claimed an entire section of seating. As Sarah approached the podium, she spotted familiar faces throughout the crowd, Professor Williams beaming with pride, Marcus giving her an encouraging thumbs up, even Jessica clapping enthusiastically from the back. 2 months ago, I walked onto this campus wearing my brother's military jacket, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly across the quad. "I wore it because Captain Miguel Martinez is serving in Afghanistan, and this jacket makes me feel connected to his courage when I need to find my own." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces that were now listening intently instead of mocking. "I was mocked, harassed, and humiliated for that choice. Students called me names, posted my photo online, and made my life miserable simply because I chose to honor my brother's service in a visible way." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. Sarah felt her confidence growing as she realized she had their full attention and respect. But what those students didn't understand is that military families serve too. We serve by worrying every single day about someone we love. We serve by keeping our families strong while someone important is far from home. We serve by supporting not just our deployed family member, but all the people who depend on them. Sarah looked directly at the section where the fraternity brothers who had harassed her were sitting. They had been required to attend as part of their disciplinary action, and she could see shame and understanding on their faces. Military service teaches sacrifice, honor, courage, and putting others before yourself. These are values that should be celebrated on every college campus, not mocked or dismissed. When you see someone wearing military insignia, don't assume they're playing dress-up. Ask yourself what story that uniform might tell, and consider showing respect instead of judgment. The applause was building as Sarah reached the conclusion of her speech, but she held up her hand to indicate she wasn't finished yet. "My brother Miguel is supposed to come home next month for leave, but his mission has been extended. He won't be here for Christmas, and we don't know when we'll see him again. But I want him to know, and I want all of our service members to know, that their families are proud to carry their strength with us wherever we go." As Sarah stepped back from the podium to overwhelming applause, she noticed a strange sound growing louder in the distance. It was a rhythmic thumping that seemed to be getting closer to campus. Dean Morrison looked confused, checking her notes as if she had forgotten something on the program. The sound grew louder and more recognizable. Helicopter rotors. Students began looking up at the sky, shading their eyes against the morning sun. Sarah felt her heart pounding as a black military helicopter appeared over the campus buildings, circling once before beginning to descend toward the large open area behind the ceremony stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean Morrison announced over the microphone, her voice filled with excitement. "It appears we have some unexpected guests joining our ceremony today." The Black Hawk helicopter touched down gently on the grass, its rotors creating a windstorm that sent programs and leaves swirling through the air. Students pressed forward, trying to get a better view, while security personnel quickly formed a perimeter around the landing zone. Sarah stood frozen on the stage, watching in disbelief as the helicopter door opened. The first person to emerge was Colonel Hayes, followed by several other uniformed personnel. But then, incredibly, impossibly, a familiar figure stepped down from the aircraft. Captain Miguel Martinez, in full dress uniform, scanned the crowd until his eyes found his sister standing on the stage. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The crowd erupted in cheers as they realized what was happening. Miguel strode across the grass toward the stage with the confident bearing of a seasoned soldier. But his face broke into the same boyish grin Sarah remembered from their childhood. Behind him walked his commanding officer, Major Thompson, who had insisted on personally delivering Miguel home for this special moment. "Permission to approach the stage, ma'am," Miguel called out to Dean Morrison, his voice carrying the formal tone of military protocol but his eyes dancing with joy at seeing his family. Dean Morrison was crying openly now. "Permission granted, Captain Martinez. I think your sister has been waiting for you." Sarah ran down the stage steps and into her brother's arms, not caring that hundreds of people were watching and recording the reunion. Miguel lifted her off the ground in a bear hug that felt like home and safety, and everything she had missed for the past 8 months. "I am so proud of you, little sister," Miguel whispered in her ear. "The whole base has been talking about your speech video. You showed more courage in that quad than most soldiers show in combat." "But your mission," Sarah said through her tears. "I thought you couldn't come home yet." Major Thompson stepped forward with a smile. Captain Martinez's exceptional service and the unique circumstances surrounding his family situation warranted special consideration. Sometimes the military can be surprisingly flexible when it comes to honoring our own. The crowd was going wild, with students cheering, applauding, and many wiping away tears of their own. Sarah's parents rushed onto the scene, followed by Elena carrying baby Sophia, who gurgled happily at seeing her father for the first time in months. Colonel Hayes approached the family reunion with another surprise. "Captain Martinez, in recognition of your outstanding service and the inspiration your family has provided to military families nationwide, you're being awarded the Army Commendation Medal. But more importantly, your deployment rotation has been adjusted. You'll be stationed stateside for the next 2 years." Sarah felt like the ground was spinning beneath her feet. Not only was Miguel home, but he would be staying home. The constant worry that had been her companion for months suddenly lifted from her shoulders. "There's one more thing," Miguel said, reaching into his uniform pocket. He pulled out a small patch, the same unit insignia that was on the jacket Sarah wore. "I brought this for you, but I see you've already been representing the family name pretty well." He pinned the new patch next to the existing one on Sarah's jacket, while the crowd watched in respectful silence. "Now you're officially part of the unit, Private Martinez. Your mission is to keep being brave, keep standing up for what's right, and keep making us proud." Dean Morrison returned to the microphone, her voice thick with emotion. "I think we've all witnessed something extraordinary today. This is what it means to serve. Not just the individuals who wear the uniform, but the families who support them and the communities that honor their sacrifice." As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Sarah found herself surrounded by classmates who wanted to meet Miguel and hear about his experiences. The same students who had mocked her weeks before were now asking respectful questions and expressing genuine gratitude for his service. Marcus pushed through the crowd to shake Miguel's hand. "Your sister is amazing, sir. She's changed a lot of minds around here, including mine." Emma from the military-connected group approached with her father, the Navy pilot, who had flown in for the ceremony. "Captain Martinez, I wanted to thank you. Your sister helped me find the courage to be proud of my military family instead of hiding it." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah realized that everything had changed. The jacket that had once made her a target now made her a bridge between the military and civilian communities on campus. Her story had inspired other military family members to speak up, educated civilian students about the realities of military life, and created lasting bonds between people who might never have connected otherwise. That evening, as the Martinez family gathered for dinner at a local restaurant, Miguel raised his glass of water in a toast. To my little sister Sarah, who fought her own battle while I was fighting mine overseas. You wore my jacket with more honor than I ever have. Sarah looked around the table at her family, complete again, safe again, proud again, and realized that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons, but with words, courage, and the simple act of standing up for what you believe in. The camouflage jacket hung in her closet that night, no longer a symbol of isolation but a badge of honor that had brought an entire community together. And tomorrow Sarah would wear it to class again, not because she needed to feel brave, but because she had learned that true bravery means being yourself, even when the whole world is watching.